Welcome to Layers of Communication with your host, Lydia Taggart. Life presents experiences that add a layer to who we are and how we see the world, affecting how we communicate. Lydia is here to help you take apart the layers and create new ways to connect and build relationships. So now, please welcome the host of Layers of Communication, Lydia Taggart.
Welcome in. Let me know that you're here and let me know if you have any questions. This is Layers of Communication. I'm your host, Lydia Taggart. I'm super excited to share this with you today. I'm so happy to be here. It's going to be a little bit shorter of a show, be about 30 minutes or so, that we're going to be discussing the layer of names. It's like your first impression. We have layers added onto us and it becomes who we are and we get stuck in these layers. But what if it's your name and you're always going to be having that with you all the time? No matter where you go, you're always going to have a name. And if you don't have a name, somebody will make something up to call you. And that's always fun, right? But what do we call ourselves? Back once upon a time in Romeo and Juliet, they said, what's in a name? A rose by any other name would smell as sweet. It's who we are that matters, but we still have names. What are the names? They're our first impressions. How we go about in the world is really, really affected by our names. You might have some sort of fancy name that's professional, but when you're with your friends, you have a nickname or a shortened name. One of my sisters, Larissa, we called her Lacey, Rissa, all sorts of things. I think she had like 15 nicknames. But names, they mean something, right? In my church, we give babies a blessing and a name. The names can be blessings. There's so many things about names. And I know a lot of people who don't really care for their name, and they ask to be called something else. Well, let's talk about these names. How do you get a name? How do you get a nickname? And does it really matter? There are books, like big books, and websites with name generators and all sorts of places to find names. They have meanings associated with them. I know when we were naming our quads, it was quite the quandary to name the quads. That was fun. And there's 4 of them. We had to come up with 4 names all at the same time. And we researched, especially for my daughter. My husband really wanted her to have the perfect name. And names are important, right? And we looked up all the different meanings and where they would come from. And my mom was fun. She was like, if they're all girls, then you could name them all flowers. And we did end up naming Lily, and that's a flower name. But we don't have a rose or a buttercup. Or, there's so many different ways that you could name after a theme like that. And we didn't want to do that. And Lily she's Lily. But my husband struggled for a long time because he wanted it to be the perfect name. And it wasn't as big a deal for the boys because there were 3 of them. We had to come up with 3 perfect names. And of course, we'd already named Stephen and Dallas their perfect names already. And but sometimes we forget that our name is special and it means something to us. And it means something to our parents. There is Monsters, Inc. Have you ever seen that cartoon? And so the monster world, they're afraid of the kids coming through the closets, and the monsters go and scare the kids to get electricity for their world. And anyway, there's a main character, Sully, and he's this big blue fuzzy guy. And there's a little round green monster, and he's Mike Wazowski. And so they're a team. They work together to get the electricity, and they scare together. And this girl gets into the monster world. She's just there. And so the monsters are afraid of her, and they're trying to put her back into her world and not get caught having this human child in their world. They'd be in like really bad trouble. And so anyway, Sully goes around caring for this little girl, and he ends up naming her Boo. And there's this thing where Mike Wazowski, Sully, Mike Wazowski, He's like, put her in the door. There's her door. And they're arguing. That's not her door. That's not where she comes from. That's not Boo's door. And Mike Wazowski says, Boo? What is Boo? Well, that's what I call her. I decided to call her Boo. You're not supposed to name it. Then you start getting attached. You can't name it. And I'm like, you know what? Even if you have a bad relationship or something that has soured with your parents, if they have given you a name, if you have a name, then you have been thought about and you've been, attached to some level. Even if you have a sour relationship, you are still important and you still have a name. If somebody can call you something, anything, then you're noticed and you're important in this world. We had this little kitten come and join us. She was like a stray cat we found out in the yard, and we rescue things that we find sometimes. And so we brought her into our house and we were loving on her. And I said, don't you dare name that cat. Don't you dare name that cat. We can't have a cat. So we decided to name her Kitty. And this is what was making me think of Monsters, Inc. because Boo ended up calling the big furry blue guy Kitty. So we had Boo and Kitty. Anyway, we just went around and said Kitty, 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 Kitty. And after a while, that became the cat's name. We had her, maybe a week at most. But that was like 5-6 years ago. It's been a while. And still to this day, even yesterday, my kids were saying, why can't we have another cat? Kitty was so perfect. She is the perfect cat. Well, we couldn't keep her because we have some severe allergies, really severe allergies. It was like the cat might live with us, but the kids might die. So we had to not keep her, and it was really sad. But if you, that became her name. It wasn't intended to, but we spent time with her and we loved her, and now she has a name. And sometimes relationships develop that way too. But over time, you grow attached and you get a name. Nicknames. Nicknames are fun. Do you guys have any nicknames? I want to know what your nicknames are, or nicknames for people. I think that's really fun. For a while, let me say dude. Dude is one of my words. And I would call people while I'm driving. I'm like, yo, dude, hey, dude, the light's green or whatever. And we would have, just dude was a word that I would say all the time. And I'm not sure how it happened, but somehow dude transferred over to one of my kids. And before, it was just everybody was a dude. And now dude means Merrick. If you call dude, nobody else looks. It's definitely his name. It's his nickname is dude. One of my other kids is called Yo. Yo. Just fun nicknames. I mean, of course, they've still got their names, but when they are like, I'm not Evan, I'm Merrick. So many of us as parents, we do that where we're like, you with the nose, come pay attention to me. And sometimes it just turns into a nickname. But Merrick had a fun nickname for a while when he was younger. Our nanny came to visit after they'd grown up a little bit, and she wasn't our nanny anymore. And we love her. Brandy is super special to us. And she just made a big difference in our world. So yes, Lacey, you guessed it, Meatball. His name was Meatball. Brandy came over one day to visit after she hadn't seen him for a couple months or whatever. And she says, oh, Merrick, you're growing so big. Look how big you are. You're getting to be such a big boy. And he says, I'm not a big boy. I'm not Merrick. I'm Meatball. So we called him Meatball for a little while, and now he's dude. Kids are fun, right? And nicknames are fun. I see a lot of people have checked in and said hi. Hi, everybody watching on Facebook. And for those of you on the replay, thanks for coming in. Let me know what you're thinking, how you're feeling about your name. Names can be a problem if we're stuck on a name and we don't know. Okay, so for me, when I found out that my dad wanted to name me something that I was like, oh, I'm so glad I didn't get named that. But my parents argued over, you know, that's not her name. Her name's Lydia. And my dad ended up naming the dog the name that he wanted instead. I'm not going to say it because it's a fine name. I'm just glad that it wasn't my name. And anyway, people argue about what to name their kids because your name is important. But what's most important is how you feel about yourself. And the name, just like they said in Romeo and Juliet, any other rose, or a rose by any other name, would smell as sweet. And you can see your personality shining through. You can see how you interact with other people. There's so much more to you than your name. Now, I've known other people who've had a really bad relationship with their name, and they change their name so that it reflects who they really want to be, or that it disconnects that relationship, disconnects if they change their last name. But what else is the name? Lacey says she's glad her name isn't Preston. Oh, I know why. Oh, and names can be a source of like bullying, right? There's bad names out there, of course. We won't go into that. But for me, my when I was younger, my maiden name was Howard before I got married. And there was the movie Howard the Duck that came out around the time I was in 6th grade, I think it was. And so people on the playground would say, oh, look, it's How Weird. And I was How Weird. And now I embrace being weird. But back then, it wasn't very fun. And now my name is Taggart. I've taken on my husband's name. And when we take on a name like that, he's claiming me, if you will. I am his wife. We're married. And what I do reflects on his name. Names are, names are so important. Is that the best word I can come up with to describe what a name is? But they really are. They really are. I just keep thinking back to when we give babies a name and a blessing. And the name can be a blessing. I feel very blessed to have my husband's name. I feel very blessed to be associated with him. There's a lot of other ways. There's a lady I know that she changed her name after she divorced because she did not appreciate that relationship anymore. The names are really something to be thought about. I mean, they are thought about before we get them and when we take them on. Jason really loved the name Serenity because it means calm. Yes, yes. Now that she has been born, it really fits her. I know she sleeps all the time, right? My little niece. She's a beautiful baby. And my sister calls her Rennie. Also, I absolutely love my last name, Bailey. It's more me. Yes, because that's who you are. That's who you are. Our names, the names, we kind of put judgment on them sometimes, and we know what they mean. There was once a person in our church congregation who got up. There was like open mic time. Anybody could go up and say something, and usually that was supposed to be like thought of like bearing their testimony or experience of why they know God is real, how the Gospels help them in their life, stuff like that. He got up there and went through each one of his kids' names and why he chose their names and what it means and all this. And they had some weird names, unusual names, I should say not. And they were kind of weird. But he felt like he needed to go up and explain everybody in his families, all his kids' names and why they picked those names, because it was special and important to him. And if we have names, they mean something, they're special and important. So I was talking to you earlier about how my daughter Lily, we were looking for the perfect name. And we ended up choosing Lily Cassandra. Cassandra is elegance, and it's both of them. And I'm not the best memory, of course, but back then when we were choosing the names, I really wasn't in my right mind. There's a few things I would not recommend making big decisions when you're having quadruplets or something big and life-changing like that. So anyway, her name is Elegant Princess Warrior or something like that. All of our kids, we wanted to have strong names. Brendan Drake, it's Dragon Prince Dragon, something like that. And then we've got Evan Denali, and Denali is, there's a mountain that's steady and firm named Denali, but it's also, if I remember right, one of the Native American tribes' word for God. And we just have all these, there's power in a name when we choose a name. So there's a lot more to it than just picking something randomly. And I know a lot of other parents, they might not research the name and know the meaning behind it because that's not them. They just want something that sounds cool, but they still put a lot of thought into it. One of my friends, she named all of her babies after stars in movies that she loved. They were her favorite people in movies. I know some people name them all out of the Bible. Some people name them all the same letter. Like, we'll pick on Lacey since she's here. Serenity. She also has Zariah and Zoe, and they're just adorable. I love them. And then they've got Troy. Their boy is Troy. And my kids are like, oh, they're picking all Z names. And I don't think that was really intentional with their family, but it turned out to be fun. I know a family that has all K sounding names. They're not all the letter K, some are C, but they've put enough thought into it where, I mean, that takes a lot of thinking, right? Letter Z takes a lot of thinking to find names that all match with the same letter. I love the letter Z. One time when I was a kid, I was like a teenager, right? 16, 17 years old. We went out to, me and my friends, we went out to this haunted house and we met some guys there and we were playing around, having fun, whatever, and just hanging out. And I was like, I don't really want this guy to know where I live or be able to find me. And so I convinced him that I had a silent letter Z on the end of my name. And like you have a silent E, I have a silent Z on the end of my name. It was so hilarious. I ended up being friends with him for a while. And he sent me a letter, or I ended up not being afraid of him knowing where I lived and stuff because he turned out to be an okay guy. But he sent me a letter, Dear Lydia. Still so funny. So funny. Okay, so we're getting almost to the end of our time here. I want to remind you, find me on lydiataggart.com. And this is Layers of Communication, in case you didn't know that's where we are. Because our experiences layer onto who we are. It's not who we are. It's part of who we are. And we don't want to get stuck in that identity. It's just a part of who we are. It enhances our ability to interact with the world in a better way. And names are part of that. Names are one of our layers of experience. And it was so funny. I really did convince him. I was like, he wrote that on the letter. He believed me. That was so hilarious. I don't think I ever told him that it was not real. But if I ever find him, I will apologize. And I'm sure he will laugh really hard too. So my last thought is, who are you? Who do you want to be? What do you want your name to stand for? And there is scripture that says, now that you've accepted Christ, you do everything in the name of Christ. Well, that's not a direct quote, of course. I don't have the reference right in front of me. But why would that be? I think it goes back to taking on the name of Christ. As I take on my husband's name and I am claimed by him, so to speak, similarly, in the Bible, it talks about Christ, the church being married and stuff like that, because he takes us and claims us as his. And so then we take on his name as that commitment to him. And that's where that relationship can be built if you believe in Christ. Whatever higher power you go with, I think it's very similar. No matter what you call your God, your higher power, are you taking on that power as part of who you are? Are you allowing yourself to be claimed by the universe? Are you at peace with who you are and where you're going and how you're going to get there? Because you're important enough to have a name, and your family claims you. And I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad you've been here today. Usually I end the Layers of Communication show with something to work on. I just want you to ponder that. It's not hard to be claimed and accept being claimed. There are some relationships, like my friend who's changed her name after she got divorced. You don't want to be claimed and associated by that anymore. And there are others that would benefit from having that name associated with you, having that nickname. I believe that's everything that I had on my notes today. Just a bunch of fun thoughts about what's in a name. What's in a name? Remember that you are worth it. And so are they. Thanks for being here. Go be part of the world. Let people know who you are, because you're amazing. And I appreciate you being here. All right. See you later. Thanks. Love you. Bye.
You've been listening to Layers of Communication with your host, Lydia Taggart. Tune in next week as we discover the layers in order to communicate and connect down to your core on Lydia Taggart's Layers of Communication.